Sure thing. Hey, Coach. Just kind of kicking off. Generally, where do you feel like you maybe seen the
Mute
biggest
my
strides
audio.
from the last scrimmage to this scrimmage?
I didn't hear the question. I didn't have my audio on. One more
Uh,
time.
you're good. I was saying, where do you feel like you've seen the biggest strides from the team from last scrimmage to this scrimmage?
I would say overall execution and in all three phases. I thought a week ago, we weren't very sharp with our special teams substitutions and our execution of the special teams fundamentals. This week, I saw a major improvement. Guys being into the scrimmage, understanding substitutions when somebody's down. Guys were ready to go. We were able to get most of the special teams work, all those special situations, tight punt, pooch punt. We're able to get a lot of good work, on the special teams. And I thought offensively this week, I saw them make a few more plays. I thought we moved the ball more efficiently on the offensive side than last week. And then defensively, I also saw our defense, they came away with some takeaways here today, which is something we've tried to emphasize from the last scrimmage to this one.
We'll go to Varun next.
Hey, Coach.
What's up, Varun?
Apologies if my connection is spotty. I'm driving right now, but want to ask about Coach Brian Williams. The passing stats defensively were really impressive last year. Was curious, what differences did you see from the team coverage-wise from what you guys did in 2021?
I think the biggest thing was the experience of the corners. In 2021, we lost Deontay Banks, I think, in the Bowling Green game, and he missed the remaining part of the year. And so not having him out there, and then even at that point, I can remember Tarheeb still being kind of nicked up. So I think having a healthy Deontay, Tarheeb being healthy, and then I thought the major improvement we saw with the confidence of that group on the back end, obviously with Bo and Dante Trader kind of taking over in 2022 for some veteran players like Nick Cross and Jordan Mosley. I thought both those guys really did a good job of getting our guys in the right positions from a year ago. So to me, I think the experience probably played the biggest gain in there, but I also thought Coach Williams and the defensive staff did a really good job of mixing the coverages with how they adjusted their front, and we added some of the drop stuff that gives people problems and shrinks some of the zones.
How did you see that that experience and confidence kind of show up in what you guys were able to do schematically?
I think it's really, really big, really important, especially on the back end on defense, that those guys have those short-term memories where when something bad happens, they keep playing, and even when they make plays, they just continue to get to the next play. And I thought we did a really good job of that a year ago. I thought the defensive staff, led by Coach Williams, really made that a point of emphasis, and I saw that really help us.
And then with Coach Williams, with him being on the staff since 2019, how have you seen him kind of grow and develop as a coach to the point where, he starts as a position coach and now he's a defensive coordinator?
Yeah, I think, what's happened with B-Dub in our program is epitomizes what our program's all about. I oftentimes talk about us being a developmental program, and it's not just the players, but even the coaches. And, Brian Williams was a part of the original staff. He's a guy that's been here to see, the trajectory of our program change, and has played a major role in helping us get to where we are today. And again, I still think his best football is still ahead of him as he's become more comfortable and really helped himself on the back end with surrounding him with some great coaches. Those things really have played a major role. And, I think he's one of the shining stars in this profession, and will very soon have an opportunity to hopefully run his own program.
Thank you.
We'll go over to Emmett next.
Hey, Coach. I know you've said, and I think it's a common thing, that the defense kind of starts ahead of the offense when you guys get into fall camp with the new offensive coordinator. I know you guys are still running the same system, but do you feel like you're on schedule in terms of the team kind of adopting this new offensive, philosophy? And then, do you think that maybe the separation between the defense and offense is starting to even out a little bit?
Yeah, from an offensive standpoint, it's not a new system, and do we have some new concepts that we run for sure? Josh's experience and some of the things he's been able to do since we last worked together, the success he had at Michigan, especially running the football and some adjustments to things and how we've done it, but there hasn't been a big learning curve because there hasn't been a wholesale change of what we do, and philosophy hasn't changed. But I think what you're seeing is that the offensive side of the ball is starting to get accustomed and used to the personality that Josh will add to the system. The big thing when you hire coordinators, and with me being an offensive guy, is it's a fine line of me allowing and making sure Josh is able to put his personality as a play caller into what we do and what we've done around here successfully. And I've seen that transition go really smoothly. Obviously, we haven't been in a game situation yet, but we got one coming up in a couple of weeks against Towson here, where we'll get a better idea of where we are and how far we've come.
Go back to Ahmed.
Hey, Coach. Just wanted to get your gauge just kind of on Mike Purcell. I know he was a guy, obviously he got here mid-year. Just how do you feel like he's kind of settling in, and how do you feel like he and Aric Harris are looking at center?
Yeah, unfortunately, Mike wasn't here mid-year. He was one of those guys that came on once the summer started.
Or, sorry, yeah,
no, that's
right.
okay. He ended up didn't make it here in the spring. Spent some time there at Duke, and then came in here in June. And I think he's really has helped himself, and probably one of the guys that has had some of the bigger strides from week 1 to week 3, which you would expect because he, had the opportunity to go through the summer PRPs, the player run practices with us. But I think we started to see him kind of take the next step as he has a good understanding of our system, and Coach Braz and those guys have done a good job of bringing him along. And we've got some healthy competition, there at the center position with both he and Aric Harris, and he both that competition that I feel has made us better as a whole there on the O-line.
Go over to Gene.
Hey, Michael, you mentioned the opener in a couple of weeks. Just I'm curious, do you go into any game planning at all for the opponent this week, or is that 2 weeks down the road? Like, what do the next couple of weeks look like for you as far as that goes?
Yeah, no, right now we're still in camp mode. We've got about another 4 or 5 practices to before we kind of start transitioning into our preparation for Towson. And so I think by the end of next week we'll start working into Thursday, Friday, I think, is when we'll start on our Towson prep to give us a couple of extra days to get us ready to go. And obviously it's a new team, new coach there at Towson. So we don't have a great knowledge of what they're doing or what they run. So we've got to be really good at knowing what we do well and be ready to make those adjustments once the game gets on us.
And when you're still in camp mode, like, what do you want to see over the next few days before you start looking at specific game planning?
It's mostly these young players, the 2s and 3s, as they're trying to create roles for themselves. We've got a pretty good understanding now with 2 scrimmages under our belt, what some of our starters and guys that have been around here have been able to do. Today, we were able to kind of lessen the workload on our starters and really get a better understanding of some of the competitive positions groups that we have going. We're trying to have guys define roles. And so this next week, we'll continue to do competitive things in practice. We'll continue to evaluate, the different position groups that we do have competition at, as well as some of these younger players that will be thrust into roles, whether it be on special teams or a backup role to help us. And that's what we want to continue to work on as we get into 4.
Thank you, Michael.
Go back to Varun.
Hey, Coach, with talking about how the starters are falling into place, how close do you feel to having that 5 along the offensive line solidified?
Yeah, not there yet. Still rotating different groups and different personnel. The one great thing about the group up front and the way Coach Braswell really has trained all these guys is their position flexibility gives us a lot of different rotations of how we can play those guys. And so right now we're looking for the quality depth of hopefully having 10 to 12 guys that can play winning football for us. We still got a couple of decisions to make on the 1-0 line, and we've got some really good competition there with some guys competing, as well as some of the new guys that just got here that are now starting to feel comfort in our system. So not there yet, but our goal is by the end of this week to kind of have a good understanding of how we'll play these guys across the board.
And then from today's scrimmage, any standout players or moments?
I mean, it's hard as I said, and I know you guys hate it. Dustin tells me stop saying it, but you know, when I'm standing back there, I'm looking at it not from a individual point of view. I'm more holistic, and I think the thing that jumps out for me was the efficiency in all three phases. And so, particular people maybe have it flash, and I'll have a chance to watch that here once we kind of get done with some of the festivities we got going on around here. But I was really happy with the style of play on offense, defense, special teams, how we moved around. We stayed off the ground. We minimized some penalties this week. So leaving there, I left there feeling like the Terps got better today.
Thank you.
Yep.
We have time for two more. We'll go to Wes Brown.
Hey, Coach. Obviously, Jeshaun Jones coming back. It's kind of rare to see a guy stick around this long. Have there been any instances where you kind of seen his experience kind of help some of the guys behind him? And I guess you kind of mentioned Brian Williams sticking around that long, but this day and age, what does it mean like to you to have a player stick around for that long in your program?
Yeah, you know, Jeshaun, there's been some aha moments, especially from a leadership standpoint. You know, the other day we kind of had one of those tough practices and we backed it up later that evening. And Jeshaun was one of those guys that called the team up before we started practice to kind of set the standard for, hey, look, we didn't meet our standard the last practice, and now the goal is let's come back and get better. And so that's the first time I've seen him kind of put himself in that position. It was great to see. To me, you know, from a leadership standpoint, he's the guy in that room that those guys lean on. We've got a not necessarily just a young room, but an inexperienced room, because even with guys like Caden Prather and Tyrese Chambers coming in, they haven't had experience in the system. And I know he's really played a role of kind of coach mentality with all those guys. And I expect Jeshaun to have a big year for us.
And we'll go to Emmett for the last question.
Out of curiosity, you know, you touched on this a little bit a couple answers ago, but what do the rotations and substitutions look like in a preseason scrimmage as opposed to maybe, you know, your game substitutions where you might tighten it up a little bit? And then kind of adding on to that, how does the roster construction go about? Are you trying to get certain matchups, you know, to take a look at?
The roster at certain matchups.
As in who's on what team for the scrimmage?
You know, what we do is our depth chart now is a daily work in progress. Guys go up and down the depth chart based on how they perform the previous practice, previous situations. And so, you know, for us, the rotation for us today, we had certain guys we wanted to see run with the ones because, you know, for instance, you take the quarterback, we know who Leah Tungavailoa is, but if Leah Tungavailoa is not out there, which we found ourselves in that situation in Northwestern a year ago, you know, how does Billy operate this system behind the 1-0 line? Same thing with a guy like Cam Edge, who's competing with, you know, Billy there for that number 2 job. So, yeah, we put some thought into how we want to rotate players, some of our better players that have established themselves from a production standpoint. You know, we wanted to see what some of the younger guys or some of the newer guys are able to do under the lights per se. And so, yes, some thought goes into the rotation from the standpoint of seeing and putting guys in positions to where we can make decisions on their roles.
All right. Thank you, Coach. Appreciate the time. Appreciate you guys all coming on.
Thanks, guys. See you guys soon.